everybody, I'm Tiffany, and today I'm going to show you how to make flowers out of fabric. One thing that a lot of people use are these yo-yo makers by Quilter, and you can get them in all different sizes. Mine is a 60mm disc, and the problem with these is that when you make a fabric yo-yo, it doesn't really look like a flower, although you can use them for a lot of other different things. I just find that the instructions aren't that great that come with these, and they're also pretty expensive, and since I don't use them that often, I decided to come up with a better way to make them so that you don't have to use any other equipment. So this one's made out of just a regular cotton fabric, and this one's made out of a lighter fabric, so you can see it's a lot flowier. So I'm going to show you how I made them. So I cut just a regular piece of quilting cotton, 2.5 inches wide by 14 inches long, and I ironed it in half so that the pretty side of the fabric is up. And you're going to want a thread and needle just with a single thread and tie a knot on one end. And starting from the end of your fabric, you're going to want to stitch about 1/8 to 1/4 inch away from the raw edges of your material. So you're keeping the folded part of your fabric towards you when you're doing this. And what you're going to want to do is do a really wide, like a gathering stitch all the way along. And it doesn't have to be neat, so it can be a little bit messy, and it's okay if you're not the greatest hand sewer because you won't see it when you're done either, which is good. So just make really big stitches all the way along, and the only important thing is that make sure that when you push your needle in and out of the fabric that you're the same distance away from those raw edges. And you're just going to want to keep going until you reach the end. And then you're going to pull on your thread and your flower is going to gather into the center. And I kind of sit it down on the table and work it with my hands a little bit so that it's as flat and evenly shaped as I can get it. Although I guess no flower is perfect, but you kind of want it to look good. And then when you think you have it the way you want it, you're going to flip it over to the back, and you're going to take the two short ends that you started your stitching with, and we're going to sew those together. And again, your hand stitching doesn't have to be all that great. You just want to make sure that the center is nice and tight because you don't want a hole there. And then you're going to do like a little whip stitch. So you're going like back to front towards you when you're making your stitches, so that the closer your stitches are together, the stronger this little seam is going to be, because you don't want it to come apart on the side. And then when you get to the end of your seam, you're just going to knot your thread. Make sure that it's nice and strong. And then when you're finished, you can cut the end of your thread away. And when you flip it over, you'll have this perfectly gathered little circle. So because I didn't hide my raw edges of my fabric when I started. I just ironed it directly in half. You can see the raw ends of my fabric in the middle. But what I'm going to do to fix that is I'm going to put a little button in the center so that it covers it up. And so then you're just going to take your thread again, and this time for buttons I always recommend doubling your thread because you want it to be stronger and you want it to take less time when you're doing it. But when I'm doing any other kind of hand sewing, I always just use a single layer of thread, which means you only tie the knot in one end of the thread instead of both of the ends together. Okay, so then you're just going to position the button where you want it, and going from the back of your little flower you're going to just start to sew your button on. Also, as a side note, it's easier to sew the button on the flower if you have a button that opens at the top and the holes go directly through, rather than the kinds of buttons that are smooth across the top and they have like a loop of plastic on the back of them, because that's the kind of button that I used on this flower, and it was a lot harder to get underneath there and sew that button on nice and tight. So I definitely recommend these kinds of buttons that have the holes that go straight through the front. And the reason why I'm showing them to you is because I think they would look really cute on like a wall hanging if you hand embroidered stems for them, or you can use them as an embellishment for like a handbag or a table runner or something else that you're making. I just think they'd be really pretty and really good for odd buttons and scraps of fabric. Okay, and then when you think your button's on there real good, you're just going to go on the back again and make yourself a knot. And pull that all the way through, and then you're going to cut your thread off, and when you flip it over you're going to have a pretty little flower like that with a button. And I think they're just so cute, so I think everyone should go home and try and make one.